eRoad provides fleets with advanced capabilities for remote reefer control, real-time compartment mismatch detection, product-specific temperature alerts, and a host of compliance management applications. It's time to revisit how your refrigerated goods are monitored. Welcome to Running on Ice, the coolest community in freight. I'm your host, Mary O'Connell, bringing you the latest tech updates, warehouse news, and everything happening in the cold chain world. Not only is there the coolest show in freight, but there's also Running on Ice, the newsletter that could not be colder. You can subscribe to that on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. Today we are joined by Jim Rice, president of Uptake. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks, Mary. Glad to be here.
I am pretty excited about this. This is something that I think not a lot of people think about, especially when it comes to cold chain, that predictive maintenance and everything like that, and kind of how it really does help reduce spoilage. Before we get too far into that, let's get some background on you and how you started at Uptake.
Yeah, so I joined Uptake about 18 months ago. I've been in the telematics software space for the better part of 20 years. If I look back, the very first thing I was doing was putting a cell phone into a lockbox, putting that into a car, into the cigarette lighter, and that was GPS back in the day. So that was the early 2000s. Since then, I've been on the safety side with cameras and ELDs, engine diagnostics, and then made the move last year over to Uptake. I've been thrilled with it, and some new technology that's really cutting edge that I like to chase, and then throughout my career is bring some new stuff to the front.
I absolutely love that. You just kind of kept, advancing and moving on with the technology that's there. Or as it kind of comes out. Also, a lockbox with a cell phone in it. That is a little bit genius to get the GPS down for something. That's some creative thinking for sure.
Yeah, it was neat. That was back at Nextel. We were doing something called at-road. We'd take the cheap 99-cent phones and put them in, and we were off and running, and we were selling GPS back before you could barely spell GPS. So it was good.
Hey, whatever works to get the job done. So going back to the predictive maintenance and everything like that, can you kind of explain the core principles and benefits of predictive maintenance in technology, and kind of how it is super crucial and important when it comes to, the transportation and logistics world?
Yeah, sure. So predictive maintenance is fairly new. The technology is, a few years old, but really kind of coming to the forefront now with more and more exposure. But the core principle is to take the data that's coming off the vehicles today, and do a little bit something different with it outside of what has historically been the maintenance practice, which is preventative maintenance, right? If you think, and a lot of people, combine the two, but preventative maintenance has been around for a while. It's the OEM-based recommendations. You got to change your oil at every 10,000 miles. You got to rotate your tires. Those are the traditional ways that people have set apart their maintenance programs. Individual companies will pivot on that and make their own adjustments, but it's still the core principle. It's like, hey, I'm supposed to do this because someone told me to do this. Now, what predictive maintenance does is takes that same data points, looks at historical information at the asset level, not even just the recommendation like, hey, this truck should have a, oil change here. This is actually taking the assets information based on sensor and fault code data and engine data and saying, hey, this is the recommended plan of action for this truck. You may not think that it needs to happen for another 6 weeks. I'm telling you, it needs to happen now. And then there's the reverse case where people are doing stuff just because they were told to, but it doesn't need to happen, right? And so it goes both ways. It really allows people to prioritize the maintenance and do the right maintenance on the right vehicles at the right time. That's critical.
That has to be really, really helpful because, I get my I get my oil changed every, 3 to 4 months or every 5,000 miles. And but truck drivers will literally drive like 5,000 miles in not 2 days, but a week. So they get their oil changed much more often, but they don't need just a bottle from O'Reilly's. They need like a whole big thing, and it takes many hours to get their oil changed. So I feel like if they can in any way, shape, or form push that where they're not spending as much money on maintenance and they don't have as much downtime for, their vehicles, and if they can, plan around it, where if they know that they have these they know that they have these upcoming maintenances, I can plan a load around it where I end up back home or at the oil shop that I like. And I feel like that has to be kind of almost like next level advantageous to everyone involved because it just allows you to plan for it so much easier.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think the other byproduct of that is it really reduces the return trips. So oftentimes when people bring in for the standard maintenance, that's what they do because that's what they're told to do. But there's looming problems in the background, right? And so it's like, hey, we see this and we have different, ways to alert that says, hey, it's low, medium, or high severity and things like that. But if there's a medium severity and you don't check it because you don't have the predictive, that truck is easily able to come back within a week. Right. And so now it's down twice. And so what we aim to do with a predicted program is not just, hey, what's on fire today, but what's in the background. And if I see this truck in here for something different, right, it could be nothing like, hey, I just got to get new tires. It has nothing to do with the engine. It's not going to have a breakdown. You're just getting new tires. It's worth it while it's in the shop to say, hey, what's kind of looming out there, right? I don't have a bunch of fault codes or it's not showing a ton of problems. But man, if I can nip that in the bud while it's already here, that produces, a huge ROI and efficiencies.
Oh, absolutely, because you can see trucks like pulled over on the side of the road because they've had an engine malfunction or insert problem that went wrong here. And I feel like if you can just be like, oh, you're getting new tires, well, let's just go ahead and take care of this really quick. It's not a big deal. We can do it while we do the tires. Your truck's only out of service one day. That also reduces the amount of time that truck is sat there on the side of the highway because something went wrong and now you have to fix it. Because absolutely no one at any point in time in the supply chain likes getting that phone call of, oh, the truck broke down on the side of the highway. They're waiting for a tow.
The tow
Because it
truck
takes a
companies
minute.
do.
Yeah. Oh, tow truck companies are like, no, stop
They,
doing this. We
they
need
don't like
work.
me. Tow truck companies don't like predictive maintenance. That's bad for their business.
But I feel like that's to be really helpful because, you're not going to, that way, if you're a broker, you don't have to call your shipper saying like, hey, sorry about you, but you know, it's stuck on the side of the road. Or for temperature controlled shippers, hope the reefer has enough gas to sustain the tow. Like that is, or get a recovery in there. That is, that's like everybody's worst nightmare, honestly.
Yeah, the trickle down impact, the domino effect of a breakdown is tremendous, right? Especially when we're talking about cold chain and supply, deliveries and depending on which time of year, busy weekends, all that stuff. That's catastrophic when you're on the side of the road.
So I guess when it comes to this data that the predictive maintenance sensors and everything collect, what kind of how do you kind of know what to do with that data when you come in and you get it, and how does that kind of leverage that data analytics and the sensor technologies to even detect those problems?
Yeah, so what we do is we'll ingest the data, and the data can come from a variety of sources, right? And I think that's one thing I'd like to expand on a little bit is there's more and more data coming through different providers, even if it's from different sensors and technologies. For instance, a tire pressure company, an engine reefer company might be setting temperature things, but to the TSP now, which is a little bit new. So like a GeoTab or a Platform Science, they'll share that data, and then that data can be brought in. So you don't need to necessarily have data coming from 6 different places. Like the consolidation has taken a lot of progress in the last year or two, and so that's one place to start. But the data, when you ingest it, it's using a lot of historical looking for trends. So what's nice is you don't necessarily say, hey, the engine temperature for this truck should be no higher than 225. If that truck constantly runs at a certain temperature, then that's okay. We wouldn't fire necessarily something that says it because that truck has a historical thing where it's maybe in hot conditions or it has heavy lows. Like that's not a huge thing. It'll normalize. But what we look for is those trends and those spikes and anomalies that say, hey, there's something going on here, more than just a fault code, or maybe there may not be any fault codes if it's sensor related. So it's worth taking a look at. And then you kind of categorize them low, medium, high to really help the fleet understand, is this something I need to look at today because it could break tomorrow? Or do I have a little bit of time? I know I'm seeing that truck next week. I'll get to it next week.
I like that. It kind of gives that like that threat level. And it's like, this is something that is a very big problem you need to assess now. And this is something else that, it can wait. It can wait. Kind of like when you go take your car in for an oil change and they're like, hey, in the near future, you should replace your tires, or you might need to, change your fluids. But it's not super crucial at this moment in time. They have all like the pictures of what everything looks like. And you're like, okay, well, I got the thing I needed to get done. I'll see you later for the other one.
And how often people see their trucks and what their operations are dictates a lot of that, right? If you see your
Yeah.
truck every day, it comes back to a depot and you have 24/7 mechanic shifts and things like that, your systemization and how you prioritize is going to be a little bit different than over the road. We may not see that truck for another, week or 2 weeks or things like that. So the individual fleet operation and, how they deliver and what they deliver, things like that plays into the maintenance strategy. And that's where the predictive can kind of fit in where it needs to in that process, right? It's not a one size fits all, like, hey, if you get this, you should do this. No, because it's not feasible all the time, right? And so the predictive is really good technology, but it's got to slot into the right avenue in your existing process today. It's not trying to create a new one. It's trying to enhance your existing.
So for those shippers or brokers or carriers that are managing temperature controlled freight, why is predictive maintenance absolutely crucial? Because we touched on it a little bit before with, trucks getting stuck on the side of the road, but it's more for just it's used for more than just your engine. It's so basically like, why is it super, super crucial for those that are in the temperature controlled freight business?
Yeah, the value of the load can swing pretty drastically. If you have a spoiled load, you're done, right? Like that's a huge, huge impact. Whereas somebody that's hauling wheat, the wheat may get there a week late, but it's still wheat, right? It's still good. It's still usable. That's not the same with milk, right? And so I think just the overall impact, and then we understand most of the people that are in the beverage distribution and food and things like that, those are private fleets. And so they have a lot of brand recognition. They have a lot of names. They're on the side of the truck. It's terrible to see your company kind of broke down on the side and then you're not delivering it to the store. You're going to lose that shelf space. You're no longer the front and center. You're going to be at the bottom, so there's a lot of trickle down impacts if you're not being reliable as an organization. So brand recognition, the spoil of the load, and then the trickle down impact to your end customers could be huge.
Absolutely, because we've talked about it before on other past episodes, and also it's something that Grace and I talk about a lot on Sirius XM is what happens with a load when it gets rejected from the receiver. And so especially with food products, it might not be like you might have a little bit of lettuce spoiled or you might have part of a load spoiled, but it can still technically be consumed, so it gets donated. While if you are broke down on the side of the highway, then what are you going to do with an entire trailer full of ice cream that has since melted and is a hot sticky mess all over your car? You have to, or not your car, your trailer. So like it's kind of that double-edged sword of, okay, well now you already have claims on the load and it's very clearly not going to work in your favor since your equipment was the one to fail, which obviously is beyond control, but still it broke down, and then you have to find a way to dispose of it, and then you have to get like a washout upon washout to get all of the sticky ice cream out. And let's just say it's the summertime and now it stinks and it is horrible. So
It's a
it's
compounding problem for sure.
it is. And so I feel like when you have that, just to know that, I have a higher chance of this not happening just by placing a couple sensors places and, really taking an investment in, my carriers, my equipment, everything like that, where, for everyone's benefit, we can reduce the amount of times that you're going to see, that carrier on the side of the road. Cause it's always a joke that we have, in my family is, there's certain carriers who are broke down on the side of the highway a lot, and so we have a certain joke about it.
We'll shy away from that one.
Exactly. We're not trying to put anyone on blast, but those of you who frequent the highways know who they are. So I guess when it comes, this is something that you talked about earlier that so when with the challenges that come with it. So if you pop an error message and you're in the middle of nowhere, how do you kind of assess and deal with those challenges as that comes up?
Yeah, so each company will operate a little bit different, and what we try and do is say, all right, so if you don't have our technology, you don't have anything predictive, what happens when the guy breaks down, or what happens when he calls when an engine light is? What is your existing process today, right? And I'll kind of flip it on its head. We had a customer we were talking to just last week, and we were talking about how they use the system and things like that, and they said, listen, our drivers, as soon as the dash light comes on, they call our breakdown office and say, the dash light's on, are we going to break down? What's going on? And oftentimes they'll use update to go in and go, no, there's nothing wrong with the system. It's a very low level. It's a fault code. Don't worry about it, right? So it goes both ways. It's not just about, trying to make sure stuff doesn't break. It's also about calming nerves of drivers and saying, hey, no, your truck's fine. You're going to be home in 4 days. We'll fix it then, but it's a low level thing, right? So it's it's a little bit of a peace of mind there. On the flip side, it is, okay, this is a serious problem. You're in the middle of, Oklahoma. You're not supposed to go anywhere, else past this. They'll then try and find a repair shop or a dealer network somewhere close by to take it and say, hey, you're 50 miles away from here. Right. And so it's still, that's that kind of where I talk about inserting this into the process is if your breakdown department has and knows about the technology of predictive maintenance, things like that, they can then make some decisions and say, hey, I got to route you somewhere. Right. Like I know it's inconvenient, but it's better than being on the side of the road. You got to go 40 miles east and there's a dealer repair network right there for you. And so it's finding that and making the adjustments, but you do need qualified technicians. A lot of people are having virtual technicians and breakdown centers and things like that. So people that used to work in the shop, maybe they're, getting ready for retirement, they're moving into this, they understand the data that's coming off the trucks really well. And so if you can insert that person in the process to talk to the driver and say, hey, here's threat level critical, low, things of that nature. If they can interpret the data, that's just as valuable as somebody that can work on the truck themselves. And oftentimes those people come from, wrenching on vehicles for 20, 30 years and it's time, and they can move into a virtual technician, which really helps this process a lot.
That has to be really beneficial, not only for like the driver perspective, but if you go to a repair shop and you might have a newer tech that's not familiar with an error code, you would have that person that's got maybe 30 years experience to be like, oh, no, you just go here, loosen this, do this, change this, and you're done. That has to be really beneficial also for like the maintenance techs if they're kind of lost and they're like, I've never worked on this equipment before. How do I handle it? That has to be extremely, beneficial.
The software and the people combined is powerful. So, recommended actions on what to do comes with the software and predictive maintenance. And, it's really, really helpful. But yes, having that go-to person to be able to call on and ask for guidance as you hire younger technicians. And then I think what it also does is it provides career pathing, right? We always talk about driver shortage. There's a real mechanic shortage as well. And so if you're an organization that says, hey, not only do we have, the in-house mechanics that are working on the trucks, look at this career pathing. There is ways to get into a virtual tech so you can get off your back and get into a chair and things like that. So it's really nice for companies to establish a long-term vision of saying, hey, I'll take care of you, right? Like you don't have to be, fixing these things for a long time. You stick with us and we'll help you grow.
That is something I didn't even think about where, mechanics, they need a career path and that's a job that's very hard on your body. So, to be able to know that, I put in my time and then I go and I move where maybe it's better hours or I just don't have to be on my back getting oil under my fingers every single day, coming home just covered in random auto fluids.
Yeah. 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 We think of this technology as really helpful on both the driver side and the mechanic side, right? A driver, obviously, he's not going to stick around with a company very long if he's in a truck that's breaking down quite often, right? And so maintenance is a leading, driver of employee retention and driver retention, so it helps on that side. And then you give your mechanics good tools. I think historically, and been in the industry for as long as I have, the maintenance side has always been kind of data, but the solutions hasn't quite been there, right? And so the practices are a little bit antiquated. We see a lot of whiteboards. We see a lot of spreadsheets still of people saying, hey, this is what it says. I'm not going to touch this truck until, 3 weeks from now. And so I think what you're seeing is the investment in technology. Now there's data. It's like, okay, we can actually put a solution together with the data, not just data, right? Everybody talks about, hey, there's a lot of data out there. There is, right? But how do you use it effectively? And that's where I think predictive maintenance is headed.
I think, so when it comes to like, if I'm a fleet owner and I'm going, or if I'm a shipper and I want to, make sure that, trucks are, staying serviced, is it expensive to implement this technology into a truck? Like, do you have to get all new trucks, or is it just something as simple as kind of buying a few things, putting it in next time you're getting tires changed, and then you're good to go? Like, basically, is it an investment of we're buying new trucks for everyone, or just we're buying some kits and putting them in as we get to them?
Yeah, no, most of the data comes from the aftermarket provider. So we're it's a low lift. As an example, Uptake, we are a pure software company. So there's nothing to install. We use the everything that's already installed on the truck itself. And so we'll take those data feeds, whether it's from a tire pressure management company, whether it's from a telematics service provider, whether it's from the OEM directly. We have relationships that say, hey, Just stream the data to us. We just need to ingest it, and then I'm going to turn around and spit out some good insights for you. So, love being in the software business without the hardware to touch. There's a lot of good experts that do that, right? There's sensor manufacturers, there's really good companies, there's good data that's out there. We just want the data. I don't want to touch a truck physically. I want to touch it through APIs.
So basically what you're saying is almost any truck out there on the road right now could 100% have this predictive maintenance tool, and it's just a matter of getting everything set up with you guys. You don't have to go in and put like sensors and engines and mess with anything. Just it already exists. You just have to flip the switch.
It already exists. And so the relationships between who has the data and how to get it to us, that's always going to add some layer of complexity. But we've been around long enough in the business where we have, quite a few of the integrations needed. And I don't want to say that's the easy part, but that's not the most complex part of a solution like this, is setting up a data feed between two companies. That's relatively low lift. It's, hey, what is the fidelity of the data? What is the frequency of the data? Because in predictive, you can't just get like a one sample size a day of an engine tone, right? Like if you set it to me at 12 o'clock every day, once a day, that doesn't really do me any good, right? Like I need it at a high fidelity, high frequency to say, hey, there's a spike. We get this a lot with like engine coolants, right? Drivers are notorious for topping it off. If the engine coolant level gets low, they'll put in some more and things like that, but it could be leaking, right? And so if they're topping it off, they may not tell you all the time back at the shop that they're topping this off every time they get to a truck stop. That may solve the coolant leak problem for a short term, but it's leaking. So that means it could be corroding other wires. It could be corroding other things in the system, in the vehicle and stuff like that, to where it's causing a downstream issue. The driver thinks it's good because he's just topping off the fluid, right? Topping off the fluid doesn't show any real bulk codes. It doesn't alarm the office. Predictive would see that, hey, there's a lot of spikes and kind of, anomalies in the data. And that's when we'd alert it. And they'd call the driver. It's like, oh yeah, no, I top it off every time. That's not great, right? Like we need to fix the problem, not just put a Band-Aid on it.
That's where it's like you get the up and down, up and down, up and down, and you're like, man, what's going on out there? Like,
yeah, what are you doing here?
Exactly. And it's like, oh no, I'm topping it up. And you're like, okay.
But you can imagine in a large fleet, that's hard to detect, right? Like you're not sorting through data, you're not sorting through those individual data points unless it gets surfaced to you, right? And so that's where the predictive comes in, is saying, hey, prioritize. We think there's a problem over here. Go investigate it. And there could be solutions that saying, hey, that's not totally accurate. There's a reason why it has that spike. Great. At least we've alerted it and brought it to your attention, so then you can still make the final decision on what to do.
I absolutely love that. I think it's just, I'm a big fan of data and any insights that you can get, because you can't always ask a truck engine, like, how's it going? Are you okay? Do you feel like you're going to have a breakdown soon? Because it's not going to respond.
Correct. It'll give you warning signs. It'll try and be telling you, but it doesn't come out right and say it. Yeah.
So we are almost out of time today, but there is a question that everyone that comes on the show has to answer. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Is cereal considered a soup?
Cereal considered a soup? I'm going to go with no, but more importantly, I'm going to ask you a reverse question. Is a hot dog considered a sandwich?
So no one has asked this to me on this show, and I like it. For those who do not know, check call, we end the story, or we end the interview with, is a hot dog a sandwich? And I am team a hot dog is not a sandwich, because when you go to a deli, you don't see a hot dog sandwich as one of the options. You might see like a nice Italian, you might see a Italian beef, you might see a salami, you might see a ham or a turkey club. But they're not going to say like a hot dog club. No, it's just not a thing. It's not a thing. So I'm going to say no, a hot dog is not a sandwich. And for the record, cereal is not considered soup either.
I agree. Cereal is not a soup. It's same thing. You're not going to go to a restaurant and see a soup menu and see a bowl of Cheerios on there. So we're lied.
All right. So if anyone wants to slide into your DMs about the cereal as a soup, or if they have any questions on predictive maintenance, or, need help with it, where can they find you outside the show?
Yeah, so uptake.com is a great place to reach us. We'll be exhibiting at a couple of the large conferences coming up here, with Insight in September, which is in Las Vegas, and then ATA MCE, which is down in Austin in October. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just happy to connect, and we'll put you in touch with the right folks. And yeah, definitely look into the technology. It's some new stuff that's really helping a lot of fleets. The ROI is easy. It's quick, and it's definitely beneficial.
All right, well, you heard it here first. Jim's DMs are open, so slide in. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Mary.
You can catch other episodes of Running on Ice here on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Need more Running on Ice news? No sweat. Subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. See you on the internet.